Hello, my name is Troy Wolf. This is recording number 4 of how I became a targeted individual. The events that are unfolding in a 16-year time frame, and subsequently after the attack of 2013 into 2014, how it's continued now today on up to today, 2018. Today is December the 10th, 12/10/2018. And I will start by saying this again. I, Troy Wolf, do solemnly affirm that the evidence that I shall give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Hopefully, once again, this is my second attempt on the 4th recording. I'm going to try to shorten this. I wanted all these recordings to be within a half an hour. Like I said, just highlighting bullet points of the major events in my life throughout these years. But clearly, there's so many things to cover, and I'm not even catching it all. Like I said in my introduction, if I were to put this out into a book or story format, I would be on this recording for hours and hours and hours. So let me start again now. 2015 is the dates I'm covering here, 2015 to 2018. In 2015, I began a relationship with an individual that ended up being sabotaged. I was constantly being hounded by this Katie individual, wanting to pull me away from this relationship, claiming that this relationship was no good, claiming that you shouldn't be with her, this, that, and the other. This poor individual and myself tried desperately to have a relationship, and this Katie was showing up everywhere we were. I remember on one instance, for example, we had rented a place together and started living together. And this Katie, we went to leave the apartment one day, and this Katie was standing right in the doorway and punched me literally in the face as the two of us left. This individual and myself talked several times about the relationship and basically stated either you get a restraining order on her or I can't do this. Eventually this person just walked away. And sadly the relationship ended. As time went on, I was at the time trucking over the road with this trucking company. I then switched from over-the-road trucking after all the events that were going on and went and took a local nighttime job with this trucking company, running from basically Green Bay to Chicago and back in the night. It only took a week or two for the stuff to start happening there. I ran the same route every single day. What I had noticed is that cars were now waiting for me on the on-ramps and waiting for me in truck stops where I had to fuel the truck. Interestingly enough, to my co-driver, who drove during the day, when I came in the afternoon to pick up the truck, was always messing around underneath the dash when I would show up. Eventually, the pain had gotten so bad at this company, and the burning had gotten so bad that I eventually just quit. So now I'm out of a relationship. I'm basically homeless. I'm now out of a job. I'm kind of milling around downtown. It wasn't uncommon to see police between the bus stop and the library handing out gift cards. And what was interesting about that is they were handing out gift cards to primarily black individuals that were passing me in the library or in the bus stop with their cell phones out. I don't know if that was to get the signal off my cell phone or to get a signal off of me. I'm not sure what was going on there. But they were receiving gift cards out the window of the police cars. I remember an altercation that had happened downtown between the bus stop and the library where they had stopped a homeless man. And I remember these two police were standing in the parking lot of the library. They recognized me. One looks up at me and says, "There goes the guy with the dick problem," as the two of them stood there in the library parking lot laughing. It wasn't uncommon as well downtown to see a police show up, pick somebody up milling around by the bus stop or the library, and then return them 20 minutes later. That was interesting. So being homeless, not working at the time, it took all of a couple weeks. I ended up back at Katie's room at the hotel. Funny enough, within a couple weeks of that, she pipes up and makes a comment, "I almost have you back to where I want you." Once again, I'm not understanding the comments in the conversation. So then I found a job at a local company. I was a yard jockey driver. I just drove trailers basically from one plant to another and put trailers basically from the plant into a yard, dropped them and whatnot. 1 month had passed doing that job before everything started. On an evening, I had heard coworkers, because I had worked with 3 other ones, I overheard a conversation. And the conversation went much like this. Well, they weren't able to prosecute him, so now they want to turn him into charcoal. When I happened upon that conversation, they obviously closed their mouths and went about their business. On one occasion, at about 11:30 at night, I had seen this Katie drive by. Not exactly sure, heading the direction of Appleton to Neenah. On this yard truck that I was driving, I had blown now electrical circuits twice. And on one occasion, they had told me that it was the alternator as well. On occasions at this job, they were having me move 10 to 12 trailers in a clip, only to find out that there was no reason at all to move these trailers. And subsequently, I ended up having to quit the job. Once again, could not stand the pain that I was enduring driving this truck around. I remember running into one of those coworkers after I quit. We were at Fleet Farm. It was as if this Katie and this guy that I had known from that job knew each other, because they both stood there and smiled at each other. Interestingly enough, towards the holiday time frame, I went to work at this particular hotel. That turned out to be a big mistake. It only took 2 weeks for everything to start up there as well, after I was trained on the night shift doing night audit. It seemed as if the devices were planted in the ceiling right above my head at the front desk. You could hear the clicking coming from the ceiling when the device would be turned on, and I subsequently would have to move. Of course, then began to alter my schedule, working a little bit on the night audit, then running out and cleaning something, and so on and so forth, trying to avoid these devices. On occasions, I had noticed that Grand Chute Police Department was actually sitting behind the hotel, hiding in the row of trees and bushes that were out behind the hotel. I remember one day overhearing a conversation between this Katie and an individual that had shown up with New York license plates. He had made the comment, "It's not likely he will ever recover from this," as he left. Later I had learned, after doing a little research, that where the device was actually planted up on the second floor was a lady that was staying in that room, even though she had owned a house just down the street. She was staying at the hotel. This lady actually lived 3 houses down from this Stacy that I had a relationship with back in 2003. I remember on an occasion, on one morning when I was done with my shift, I was talking to 2 ladies that were coming in to relieve me, and I was almost frozen in my tracks with the one standing in front of me stating, "We have to do this right here at the front desk." What's interesting too is one night I was doing some cleaning and I kept hearing conversations, or overhearing conversations, about cameras in the bathroom. So I had taken a device and started looking for the cameras in the bathroom. The device was beeping as if there were devices or cameras in the bathroom. but I never could locate them. And I also then subsequently got an attitude problem from some of the workers at the hotel. I remember one day standing outside having a cigarette with this Chrissy, explaining the predicament I was in, what I had been through, and what was going on, and had asked for any advice. And this was her comment in response to me. If I had any advice for you, Troy, I would quit smoking now. Also in 2015, I was out one night helping my brother deliver papers. I proceeded to start telling him the whole story. He became very annoyed that I was bringing all this up, and basically, in a roundabout way, told me to shut up about it. And his comment in response to me was, well, there's nothing you can do about it, so what's the point? Continuing now in 2016, it's interesting how in 2016 the story was switched. I am no longer a pedophile, but now I am a dangerous individual and I need to be kept an eye on and monitored. After I quit the hotel, I remember I was sleeping in the truck. Once again, I spotted Grand Chute Police Department behind the bushes running these devices. I remember one time I had gone to a Walmart, and this Walmart was the one out on Calumet Street. I ended up setting off the alarm system by the doors, the front doors of the Walmart, to look around to find nobody was there. I remember on occasions in my truck I began to sleep in parking garages. I awoke one night to the truck shaking. It then stopped. I went back to sleep. When I awoke that next morning, I found out that all the oil in my truck had been drained out. I remember in the parking garage too being hit so hard one night. I had stepped out and disconnected the battery in the truck. That didn't seem to help much. Somebody piped up in my head and I could hear this. He said, well, he's figuring it out. He's figuring it out. What's interesting, one night I was being hit so hard in the parking garage, I took off out of the parking garage unit. When I got down to street level, here sitting in an adjacent parking lot were two students with the stickers on the back of their cars from Fox Valley Technical College and a Grand Chute cop. I managed to chase one of the Fox Valley Technical students out onto College Avenue where they did a head-first parallel park, turned off their car, and looked straight as if nothing had happened. In early 2016, I remember after I had had this relationship back in 2015, I overheard this Katie individual speak up and say, well, we have now put so many people between him and her, it's not likely they will ever get back together again. In 2016, this Katie individual decides to move out of the hotel and move in and take a roommate on the other side of town. Interestingly enough, the duplex they moved into is right next to a school. What's also interesting about that too, in that time frame, is I was staying with a family member. What I had heard within 2 months of living in this duplex on the south side of town, both the water and the power company wanted to come in and install smart meters. During the time frame that I had lived with a family member, I had decided to start going to a gym. After hearing conversations in 2014, 2015 about having to stay in somewhat shape, I figured it was important that I join a gym. I began going to a gym on a nightly basis. What's interesting about that is this was a 24-hour gym. Excuse me, I need another drink. People began showing up at the gym. People with license plates I recognized. They would hit me when I was in the shower. They would hit me in the tanning bed. All of a sudden I began to develop skin rashes, and the moles on my shoulders and chest actually began to run rampant. They were showing up almost weekly. One night I headed towards the gym. I was there early. I stopped at this Walmart parking lot just down the street from the gym. I remember sitting in the parking lot there. A car had come upon my truck, circled me with 3 guys inside, went 3 lanes over, and proceeded to drill me in my liver and pancreas. To this day, 2018, I still have pain in it. It was interesting on nights. So what ended up happening after that burnage that night with the truck, I basically went and parked the truck back at the family member's house and never drove it again. 2 months later, of course, I then sold it. In my walking to and from the gym, I would cover anywhere between 20 and 25 miles a night. It was not uncommon to see police would park on dark streets, and as I walked upon them or rode my bike past them, they would then hammer on me. I remember one night stopping at a major hospital in town here, and I had ducked under a hospital canopy because it was pouring rain to check my cell phone to see when the rain would stop, only to find within 5 minutes the police had shown up and were hammering on me to leave the hospital area. Interestingly enough, in all my travels, in the middle of the night, I started going to the hospitals, clinics, police stations, courthouses between the night and the day hours, only to find out that there was a number of those individuals that I had recognized the license plates from. I remember showing up at a gas station one night, and this is a very, very telltale, interesting story. A lady behind the counter, as I walked in the front door of the gas station, recognized me. She looked over the counter at a guy that she was talking to. She mumbled something to him. The guy turned to look at me and makes this statement: "Don't worry about him. He's been chipped." I was asked on several occasions while going back and forth to the gym what supplementation I was taking. There were so many events that transpired at the gym, it's crazy. I remember one night going to the gym, and as I was coming upon the gym, everybody was flooding out of the gym. This was about 10:30, 11 o'clock at night. What's interesting is that there were 2 women talking, and one said to the other, "Who made this guy boss? Why do we have to leave? We did nothing." That night at the gym, I was hit quite hard, and you could hear the clicking actually come from the ceiling. I remember one night after being out all night, going back and forth to the gym, I was awakened one night by my mother making this comment to my youngest brother: "Do it, Chris, do it. It's not like he has anything or anything to offer anyone." Like I said, I was doing anywhere between 20 and 25 miles a night, going back and forth between the gyms. One day I was coming out of the bathroom at my mother's house. I overheard my youngest brother tell my mother, "This is going to end in suicide." And my mother speaking up saying, "No, it won't." I began to see these opaque colored film canisters showing up everywhere. Not only at my mother's house, but also at Katie's room at the hotel. Next thing I had found out is that they were taking supplements of mine, putting them in these canisters, and disappearing with them. On occasions, I went to my storage unit one time, and it reeked of marijuana. I also had noted that somebody had been in my storage unit. I was being hit very hard during the year of 2016. And I remember a conversation that I had overheard that said, "The end must be near. He looks terrible." In 2016, in all my research online, I finally came across a story that was very, very similar to what has happened to me. This lady's story was so compelling. It really put the push on to me to start looking for other people's stories. Her name is Lisa Becker, and interestingly enough, with the pennies, the Pinkays, all this stuff, actually lives in the same state that I live in, but lives down in Milwaukee. I had overheard a conversation after my time frame of living with a family member. I went and stayed with Katie over at this duplex across town on the south side. One night I had overheard her commenting, if it doesn't work high, go low. In the fall of that year, I went to work for a major pizza company. It didn't take very long for problems to begin there. On a few occasions, this Katie dropped me off at the job. And instead of driving home, this person did a U-turn and went right back by the employee parking lot. 2 months into the job at this pizza company, my coworkers, or who was on my team, ended up with an emergency meeting. As a newbie, along with 2 other newbies, we were kept out of the meeting. We were never told the content of the meeting, but that, in fact, it was an emergency meeting they had to have. I remember my trainer, his name was Peter. One night standing on the line, he says, "This isn't going to end well," is what he commented to me. And then one night he came to me, looked me in the eye, and said, "You must have an absolutely horrible home life." Within a week of working at this pizza company, the isolation began being isolated, and I was beginning to be burned in the corner of the plant. I remember one night I went and worked for a different team. The manager of that particular team, his name was Stephen. Now, on the job that I had to do working for this Stephen, he made me stand in one spot for 5 hours without a break. I remember him coming up to me. He got right into my face and said, "You're ruined. Now go take your break." I remember one night I used Katie's car to go to work. And I remember being hammered on extremely hard by Metro that was in the area. I remember one night as well being hypnotized on the line at this pizza company and being hit straight through the back, waking up dazed and confused. I remember one night I was in the break room. My trainer, Peter, was also in there, and he was telling an individual on how this device works. And this is what he said. They basically take a microwave device, split the beams off. They then take the blue beam and use it on the individual. Apparently the blue beam will burn the individual, but it doesn't get hot. There were occasions I came out to my scooter after work, and I had bought a scooter early in 2016. And people on my team, I'm assuming, started to attack my scooter because they had ripped all the wiring out from underneath my scooter, subsequently taking all the lights out of my scooter. There was 4 different occasions where I had come to work and my key card to get in the door had to be remagnetized because it was continually demagnetized. I remember one of the trainers making a statement to me, laughing, that I must be carrying an eelskin wallet. Needless to say, I ended up quitting the job, even though the temp agency that had hired me wanted me to stay on. I remember one day hopping into Katie's car with her hand on the left side of the car, on the up and down window controls, making this statement, "Death by push of a button." I remember running into an old neighbor from the Menasha area. That actually was the next door neighbor. At the time was going to a plasma place. And this individual came to work at the plasma center. Within 2 weeks I had switched to a different plasma location. What was interesting about that is I had overheard a conversation between one of the phlebotomists and the director of the plasma place, and I will call him Redbeard, point me out while I was waiting for my turn and said that, yep, yeah, that's him. My understanding is that out of 74,000, they chose him. I remember also in 2016, I took the scooter out on December the 10th. I remember being followed from the storage unit by 2 vehicles all the way down the street to a fast food place. They subsequently ordered their food and sat kitty corner to me in the restaurant. This conversation, I overheard them saying, God, I don't understand why this Katie just keeps bitching and bitching about him, even though he's going to end up with stage 4 lung cancer. Interestingly enough, on the times that I had taken the city buses, I had gone to city parks, and I would show up at the library. I began to notice an increase in individuals carrying backpacks. It's interesting, continuing in 2016 now, how there is a security guard that works at the library and walks the building every hour. I remember one day sitting down by Foxtrot Trail. A city worker had pulled up behind me in the pickup truck and then hit me straight through the back. I turned, got off the park bench, walked towards the worker. The worker quickly placed something on under her seat and then sped off. It's interesting too, when I took the city buses, that people would get on the bus with a backpack, hit you with this device, and then get off the bus 10 blocks later. I then again found another job. Unfortunately, lasted only 2 months. Within a month, the forklift driver at this job recognized me and started calling me by name. After a month, he stated, I checked around the plant, nobody knows him. Interestingly enough, the area that I worked, I was supposed to go work in the paint department. I ended up working in the windings department, where I had to stay in one spot for my 8 to 10 hour shift. Interesting as well is that all other temps that I was working with were let go of. Keeping me in one spot on my shifts, they began to burn me. I remember one night a guy came to help me with a new procedure on a winding. After about an hour of helping me, a co-worker of his said to him, were you just over there helping him with this winding? And the guy piped up and said, yes, I was. He piped up and commented, well, that device has been running. I suggest you go home and fuck your wife tonight to make sure your dick still works. I had found out at this company as well that the security guard was homeless, and I had run into this individual several times. This individual was actually carrying in the device, and it was being locked in a box on the other side of the wall where I was working. Subsequently, obviously, I quit the job, and this event in 2016 happened. I was sleeping at the time on my mother's couch. I was awoken in the night to have a red light right in my face. And it didn't matter if I turned my head to the left or the right, that red light was still in my face. Then all of a sudden, a hard bang happened in my head behind my nose. I came to, and this is in 2016, got up to find out that the front door was unlocked. Also in 2016, I had learned that there are 3 city bus drivers that are well aware of electronic harassment and the program, and certainly knew who I was. Interesting enough, in 2016 as well, as I checked the location one day on my phone, just to see, with all the hacking on my phone that was going on, where they had me pinpointed and located. When it came back, it said I was in Mexico, in a Mexican city. I later learned that my eldest brother weeks prior, had taken a vacation down in Mexico. 2017, living across on the south side of town, I found out that the neighbors next door had a sister that was in the medical field. She piped up one day out in the garage, if he's going to block the signal, then we're going to start giving cancer causing, or we're going to move into giving cancer. Basically move from the detection device into a cancer causing device. Also, I noticed now in 2017 that anytime there was a shooting, a robbery, anything newsworthy, such as the president coming to town or an abduction, that I was heavily hounded by local, state, and all these thug individuals of license plates that I could recognize. Once again, I had returned in 2017 to a Walmart to now again set the alarm off at the front door. And again, nobody else around. Interestingly enough, the neighbor ended up replacing her car doors and now installed a car alarm on her car in the garage next door. One day in 2017 at Katie's place, somebody had pulled up outside. When I went to the window, walking away from the house was a female officer carrying a big black box, I would say 1 foot high, 1 foot wide, 2 foot long. And I could barely make out what was on the top of that case. It either spelled T-A-Z or T-A-S. Obviously the neighbor was keeping this box in her trunk. 2017 as well, neighbors are coming and going in and out of the garage at 20 after the hour and 10 to the top of the hour. That sounds pretty familiar. That is the schedule and the time frame I am on. I remember Katie's friend came over one night for dinner. I was the one cooking the meal. The two of them disappeared to Katie's bedroom. I overheard Katie make the comment, "He's now been neutered." And also making the statement, I didn't expect him to stick around this long. Also again in 2017, once again, the dreams and thoughts continue to flood my head. Weird stuff. Once again, people I don't know, places I haven't been, and parties I haven't been at. 2017, now not working and no money, I applied for food share and health care, and I was approved. I thought, great, I'm going to take that health care. I'm going to run and get a checkup on myself on the state's dime. Wouldn't you know, within 3 months I received a letter stating that if you use your health care, that law enforcement, courts, and all these agencies have access to your health and medical records. Interestingly enough, in 2017, I began to speak up more about what was happening to me. Anytime I brought it up to this Katie, she never acknowledged that anything was going on. In the fall of 2017, being hounded heavily, I showed up at the storage unit. Once again, it smelled like pot. Now this time, I went and made a complaint to management about it. After my complaint that I had lodged, I had left the storage unit. Sitting outside my storage unit, lo and behold, was the private investigator from Outagamie County that I had worked with subsequently years ago in the garbage company. Interestingly enough, figuring that there must be cameras and there must be stuff in my storage unit, I then decided to set up this Katie. I told that individual that I was sniffing glue in my storage unit. She just looked at me and didn't comment. Days later, I went to the storage unit. When I left the storage unit that day, when it was in an August time frame, from 3 different directions at the storage unit, squad cars came squealing around the corners. At the time I was standing in front of JJ's laundromat. You overheard one cop yelling on his radio saying, "Here he is, should I pick him up?" Another cop piped up and said, "No, just leave him." I began to hear conversations from people at gas stations, restaurants, stores. They all seemed to be commenting on, "Now he is dead." Commenting on my nuts. Interestingly enough, at this duplex on the south side of town, Katie had a roommate. One day this roommate's father came over to inspect the basement. The basement had a flood. Lo and behold, this father worked in Greenville as a firefighter, the community that I used to pick up years ago with the garbage company. From that moment on, the roommate was now running this device on me as well. I remember times this roommate was running this device from the bedroom into the living room, and then would run this device from the living room down into the basement when I was in the basement. I remember overhearing a conversation between the roommate and this Katie, asking how this device works. Does it go through walls? Does it go through doors? I remember this roommate piping up and cutting her off and told her to shut up about it and don't talk about it. Once again, the pot issues arose again at my storage unit. Now again, I approached management and explained the situation and asked, why does this continue to smell like pot? I told management to watch a video that I had found on targeting. Subsequently, a week or so later, I had gone back and talked to this manager. She asked me and wondered if what I wasn't going through was organized crime. Within 2 months of this conversation with management, this lady had left the storage company. She had been at the company for over 5 years and up and quit almost instantly. New management is now at this storage unit. I recognize the license plate from back in 2006, 2007 and targeting. And now she is the manager of this storage unit. So of course I've had nothing but problems at the storage unit, being hit all the time, storage unit being rifled through. And then from another coworker at the storage unit, I was actually told that on occasions they bring in drug-sniffing dogs. Interestingly enough, too, any devices that I owned that had Wi-Fi access but not telephone access were broken. Interestingly enough, this Katie individual and I would go out in her car, and on several occasions keeping her left hand close to the controls of the windows. Appeared as if something was being turned on and off. I remember in 2017 as well, as I applied to a homeless shelter. Within a week or two I was approved. The night that I had shown up, I had overheard an argument between the house mother and another worker there. It ended like this: fine, 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 I will run it tonight, but if I smell anything, I'm shutting it off. Well, needless to say, I ended up staying at this homeless shelter for only one night. I then found a job as a janitor. It wasn't very long after that that I was isolated to the classrooms at the school that I was working at, where I was being hit with these devices and tested either by the fire departments or the police departments that seemed to be showing up at these particular schools. Interestingly enough, on that job as well, 3 to 4 students that had taken this job on as a summer job were college bound. Obviously, they were high schoolers, knew about me and were commenting on the events that had happened. Excuse me, I need another drink. Interestingly enough, while at this job, all of a sudden my mother does a flip out. I was back over there staying with her. Starts ranting and raving at me one night, up one side and down the other. Needless to say, ends up kicking me out. I'm back onto the street, and said that she could not handle the involvement or any of this anymore. Interestingly enough, too, in 2017, Katie's dog has now developed breathing problems, where on occasions the dog will just stop breathing. Back in June 2017, this Katie individual informs me that staying here isn't free. In May of that year, 2017, I confront the neighbors about running these devices and, of course, denied any involvement. Interestingly enough, in 2017 as well, if you refer back to the mechanic from the days of the garbage, I ended up seeing him more frequently. Not only at stores, but also parked over one block his pickup truck. Interestingly enough, in 2017, cell phone gets altered. I am now beginning to put this story together so that I can tell it. And now my phone won't save any audio recordings, won't let me take any recordings off the phone and transfer them. It won't do anything. Interesting that that happened in 2017. Also interesting, in 2017, I began to find out that they were using my heavy breathing and snoring as a way to determine that I was sleeping, and then hence run the devices while I was sleeping. Subsequently, I also learned, obviously, when I stop snoring or the heavy breathing stops, is that he must be awake, so shut the device off. Interesting, in 2017 as well, phone is now turning on by itself, and files are being deleted, including bookmarks. And this is happening down at the library, at the bus station, you name it. I remember a conversation October 24th, 2017. Neighbors standing out in the garage making a comment. Yeah, I don't give a shit what the hypnotist says. I'm going to keep doing this, and he can get 2 bang bangs. His buddies in the garage all pipe up and start laughing. Once again, October now 26th, at this duplex in the south side of town, 2017, scooter was attacked. One of the shocks on the scooter was hacksawed almost to the point of cutting it completely off, but left enough so when I was riding it, it would break by itself. October 30th, I went to the library to do some research. In behind me shows up a number of individuals with military license plates, retired individuals, hitting me harder and harder, and this was 2017, October 30th. Interestingly enough, I went to Katie's brother's house for Thanksgiving, 2017. I come in from outside after having a cigarette to overhear Katie and her nephew having a conversation. She makes a statement. Yeah, we've done just about everything to it except have it fall off. And another occasion in 2017, back at the duplex, overheard the neighbors yelling at their kid. Get away, you just walked through the beam. Towards the end of 2017, in the garage at this duplex, you heard the neighbor's sister in the medical field pipe up and say, now you should be dead. Stay that way. I remember on occasions in 2017, to avoid the attack from the devices, I would run to the basement, get on a computer to play games to pass the time. One time I had come back from being gone for the day, went and got on the computer in the basement to find out that all the games had been deleted. Once again in 2017 in November, I was awakened with a sharp pain in my back. To find out a day or two later, a huge lump had developed on my back near my spinal cord. Do you realize to this day, 2018, December, that still has not healed. And every time I'm hit in the back, it festers up, develops all sorts of pus, and this particular hole in my back still hasn't healed. I remember one night in 2017, winter, I was walking by the post office over on Franklin Street. A black individual that lived next door to the post office pipes up and says, it's going down. It's all going down. Like yesterday, I remember I was watching on TV December 18th at this duplex. I was watching TV. I see that an Amtrak train had derailed in Washington. All of a sudden, my watch makes a noise. And the noise went like this, da-da-da-da, da-da-da-da. Looking at my Timex Ironman watch, it has never made that noise. No alarms were set. And now, a year later, it has never made that noise again. I also took note of the Wi-Fi box scenario. When the roommate left, she took the Wi-Fi connection for internet connection. Interestingly enough, that Wi-Fi name for that box stayed in the area. That day that the box was to disappear from the house, the police apparently showed up at the door, then claimed they were at the wrong house and went down the street. I was never able to turn that Wi-Fi signal off for that particular box. It didn't matter all the wiring I had pulled out of that house. All the phone lines, all the cable, that Wi-Fi signal was still strong. It's interesting when the roommate moved out, how the neighbors easily took over running these devices from 6 p.m. to midnight now, every day, and hard burns while I slept. I remember one night going to sleep and being hit very hard. I moved myself to the kitchen floor. Within an hour or so, I heard people talking in the garage. And it went like this. The guy had piped up and said, well, you brought me over here. Where is he? And she piped up and said, well, he's sitting right here. Can't you see him? He's sleeping. And he says, well, I don't know why you brought me over here, but he's not sleeping. Interestingly enough, towards the end of staying there, when they would run these devices, it would also turn on the furnace. I later learned that I could put aluminum foil over the thermostat, and that stopped excuse me, the connection between the furnace and this device running. Last couple months, also in 2017, being at this location, I heard people running across the roof of the duplex. One night when I went to lie down in the back bedroom in 2017 on the floor of this duplex, I was hit in the eye, in the left eye. It caused temporary blindness. I looked in the mirror, and in the white part of my eye, it looked like it had been slit, almost like with a razor blade. I had taken pictures of that, and of course subsequently that they have disappeared. They have been wiped off my phone. 2018, in January, I was sitting at this duplex in a red chair. Katie pipes up and says, stop it, you're going to hurt him. When I came to, got up and looked out the front window, there left a gentleman in a FedEx truck. February, once again, went back to Walmart, 2018, and again set off the security alarm. Interestingly enough, the neighbors are now, in the dead of winter here, January, February timeframe, leaving footprints going from the duplex next door down to this gentleman's house with the FedEx truck just down the street. The current place where Katie is living, I had no idea was even for rent. I was kept away for up to a month before I could even see the place. After this, Katie moves back across town. Within 2 months, makes this statement: why am I again by a school? In April, Katie, sitting outside her house, states this comment: so it's like he's going to be an accident waiting to happen. In the month of April, May time frame, I'm out riding the scooter. I am being hit over and over and over at this spot just behind my nose in my head, making a loud clicking noise. Cars would actually cross over the center line, come driving at me head on, and would shoot this device at me on the scooter. It wasn't uncommon to be hit with this device 30 to 40 times a day. I remember one time in May, I was being chased to the Neenah Library on my scooter with 8 to 10 cars following me. I get there and get chased into the library with all people carrying backpacks. The comments I overheard were, "We turned it off, we turned it off, we got it off." I remember one day in June I had used Katie's car to go over to my father's house. On the drive down Wisconsin Avenue, a guy in front of me hits the brakes and stops in the middle of the road. I pulled up behind him and stopped, and behind me were cars and license plates I had recognized. This is where I go into a story of time on the road and events that had transpired. Once again, I'm well over 30 minutes, so I'm going to try to get all this in within an hour. Let me see if I can bring that story up. Oh, let's see here. Number 5. Interestingly enough, this is what transpired. I took on a job then with this family member, this father. And here's what transpired on our time, which lasted just over a month or so on the road. During one of our pre-trips, one of the first pre-trips, it all seemed to be going fine. What I had noticed out of my father is all he seemed to really worry about was what was under the hood. The big electrical block that was on the firewall side, on the driver's side. I thought this to be strange. I took a note of it, but once again I said nothing. Excuse me, let me take another drink. As we continued, once again a few mishaps on the road, but no biggie. After a couple of days, we were getting into a routine. It was all working out good. But I was also watching the start of a pattern that was developing. Every time we stopped, he got up and would leave the truck. No big deal, I thought. Stretch his legs, take a piss, whatever. Then I noticed the following. Running to the back of the truck and trailer to make phone calls and texts in the middle of the night. It didn't matter what time it was. Every phone conversation with his wife, relative, or friend, he would disclose the town and the city we were in, the highway we were on, the exit number we were at, and when we were leaving the current spot, and last but not least, who was driving. At a lot of the truck stops, he would get out of the truck and disappear. I had spotted him on several occasions at the fuel islands for cars, talking and carrying on conversations with complete strangers. Would leave the truck with his gym bag, telling me he's going to take a shower, only to find him standing at the front doors of the truck stop by the car entrance as if waiting for somebody. When I would see him, he would act as if he were lost. I remember coming back to the truck one time after taking a shower and finding my phone was lying on the bunk in a disarray, like they had taken it apart to get the numbers off the back. Then it seemed all hell broke loose. I was being questioned about the relationship that I had had back in 2015, if I have any involvement with this person, and the last time I had talked to this person. I remember one time driving across Texas. I remember after my 11-hour shift stopping in Beehive, Texas for a driver change. During my 11 hours of driving, I ended up with extreme heartburn, and the whole time driving, I felt this buzzing going on in my body. I remember hopping out of the truck and I headed for the restroom. When I was in the restroom going to the bathroom, I had overheard a guy say, "Yeah, he's dead." I finished up, then walked out the bathroom door to find my co-driver, father, and another guy who was paying for his soda standing there. I acted as if I heard nothing. I then followed the guy out the gas station to where he was going and came across and into his vehicle, where I came across an Illinois license plate that I had remembered from back home. I continued to keep my mouth shut. There was a time I took over driving one night and from the bunk, you heard the co-driver say, "Are we ready?" I began driving. Within 2 hours of my shift, my head began to buzz, not a dizzy-like buzzing, but like a humming noise. I then remember my forehead beginning to expand and that I had a lot of pressure at my forehead. Instantly, I began to get extremely tired. I kept stopping every 100 miles or so at truck stops to keep myself awake. The hardest nights of this 9-day stretch were Northern California mountains and the Rockies. That seemed to be when I was affected the most going through the mountains. To give you an example how bad it was getting, on one shift, 2 energy drinks, a pot of coffee, and 2 5-hour energies. One day, coming down through Utah, Nevada, I pulled off at a truck stop and fell asleep immediately in the driver's seat. And an hour later, I woke up to continue my shift and heard chuckling coming from the bunk. There was just so many issues and incidences that went on out driving at that time. That obviously we were in a situation where whatever was being run, and I had heard this in my head within the first week or two of being out there, somebody told them what was going on, somebody told them, obviously was to put me to sleep or have me fall asleep while I was driving. Interestingly enough, other things had transpired. I had had a conversation with him, and I confronted him about all the things that had come out of his mouth, my father, over the years, and what had happened, of course, out driving. So I confronted him about what about the middle of the night phone calls, the disclosure of where we were at all these times, the mystery at all the truck stops, the conversation that you had at the hotel about the battery cover, the conversation in the gas stations that you were having. Then from way back in 2013, as he sat on my front porch, I asked him about, what is this about I should never have a relationship? What is this about I should never get married or have any kids? And what is this comment about telling the neighbors he'll be out in 3 months? And last but not least, the comment you made, who's to say when people should die? As for a response that I got out of him was, well, so I guess what are we doing out here? Well, that was his response to everything I confronted him about. You know, so there I felt very uneasy. I had made it a decision right then and there that once we get back home, the likelihood of me coming back out was going to be slim to none. You know, I had made a comment to him that went similar to this. I'm not going to drive an 80,000-pound bullet down the highway for people to sit here and play games. There are other people on the road besides us, and it's a risk I'm not going to take. He comes back to me a day later and responds, boy, I didn't think of all the other people that are on the road as well. That was his response. So needless to say, I ended up jobless again in 2018. What it seemed more like to me in this truck driving episode was that actually my brain was just being picked to find out how I knew what was going on over the years, as if somebody was telling me, and basically how I figured all this out. That's really what it came down to. I remember coming off the road and not going back on the road, and I remember perpetrators chasing me, around, and making the comment once they did find me is, we've been looking for him for 3 days. I remember staying in a hotel in August, and a gentleman that was down below me on the first floor piped up and said, yeah, tell that Katie now he's dead. And they were hammering me from the first floor to the second. I also have noticed in 2018, since August, RNM begins, remote neural monitoring. And it's keeping me away from everybody in isolation. It's interesting how if I talk to anybody at all, and try to develop any kind of friendship with anybody, how quickly these individuals are confronted, told about me, and then these people subsequently disappear. Interestingly enough, too, my parents have all made comments about keeping me, in essence, isolated. I've been hammered on heavier and heavier and harder since September, since I started putting this story together. It seems like they have ramped up efforts to get this to stop. It's interesting, too, that exactly 1 year ago, since September to November, I have been re-listening to these recordings to put my story together, and it's funny how all the same stuff that happened back in 2017 is now happening in 2018, exactly the same way. Obviously ending the cycle in November with lung burning. It's interesting, too, that this Chrissy has called Katie in the middle of September, and shortly thereafter the lung burning starts and runs from September to November. Interestingly enough as well, this Katie lives in a really small house. Made a comment in September. Yeah, there's no place to go now, referring to planting these devices all over this place. Interestingly enough as well, in September, this Katie comes to me and asks me to write down a 3-digit number or a series of 3-digit numbers on a piece of paper. And I was never told why. I believe, again, this was to set me up. Interestingly enough, in 2018 as well, the buzzing in my ears has been ramping up. Something between the hours of 1 a.m. and 4 a.m. is happening. And this has been going on basically from September up until today. Also, I have awoken several times in 2018 here to hear this Katie stating, "He's up now, he's up now." Interestingly enough as well, as I had befriended a person from the storage unit. This person's name was Janelle. In the middle of the night one night, this Katie is talking about 1, 2 o'clock in the morning, asking, "Who is this Janelle?" and wants to know, who is this Janelle? Once again, I'm going back to the control of any kind of friendships or acquaintance at all with anybody. On several occasions between September and the end of the year here, this Katie has come up to me, looked me in the eyes, walked away, and commenting, "Oh, he's fine. He's fine." Something I haven't discussed and brought up at all is the constant, nonstop talking to somebody that has been going on since about 2015, like talking to somebody with an earbud, or maybe, and this is V2K, voice to skull, that she is carrying on all these conversations with. Once again, going back to, this is 2018, I started doing some research. In 2016, the status changed for this Chrissy's record. It now went to the minimal amount of heroin possession, 3 grams. And isn't it funny that that charge gets changed when my name was changed from a pedophile to a dangerous person? Let's see, in October, yeah, it's interesting. I was walking from the storage unit back to Katie's house, and I happened upon 2 guys out mowing their lawns and raking leaves. And one guy points me out to the other guy and says, "Hey, there he is. They're done with him. Now they're just keeping him around for the money." That was over here on Commercial Street in Appleton. Also interesting, in 2018, the other month, the phone pops up telling me I'm in Missouri as my location. And I'm sitting here in Appleton, Wisconsin. Interestingly enough, out riding the scooter around, I am followed everywhere now by police and city workers. Interestingly enough, when I would go over to Little Chute, Kimberly, when I would come back into the Appleton area, the police were right there at the Appleton border. Interestingly enough, this Katie is able to produce money in the middle of the month when she's flat ass broke. Interesting. Also interesting in the month of November is this Katie makes a comment coming back from a night out. In November, I guess I can get a new car if I cut it off. Also, Katie making a comment about significant change to the body. The 24th of November, extremely hit hard. Extremely hard in the lungs in November. Katie commenting that the body systems are beginning to shut down. November 27th, being pointed out by a black individual at the bus stop, the bus station downtown, to all the drivers at the bus company. Interesting that they're doing this during the months that I have a scooter, can't drive it in the winter months, have to rely on bus transportation, and then me being pointed out to all the drivers. That's very interesting. Once again, 2018, I'm now currently again being burned in the head. You can literally smell the cooked snot. I will give this for an example. If you've ever taken a hot pan in your kitchen and spit on it and you smell it, that is exactly the same smell that is coming out of my nose, that I can smell all the time. To close this up now, like I said, this is the 10th of December. I'm just over an hour now on this recording number 4. It should be pretty clear what I call a perfect storm here and what I have put together. I'm now going to move into the conclusion and kind of give you a bit of an update then too as towards how my days are going. But I'm towards the middle of December here, and things are